You're listening to a podcast powered by WOBI.
Hello and welcome to the WOBI podcast, where we uncover ideas, stories, and strategies that inspire leaders and empower companies to evolve, thrive, and make a lasting positive impact. My name is Sophia, and I'll be your host for this episode. Today, we're exploring the story of a company that started in a humble garage and showed us that when you combine a bold vision of a revolution that technology can create with a deep understanding of human needs, you can unlock possibilities we never imagined and change the world forever. A company with a market cap hovering around $3 trillion, making it one of the most valuable organizations in history. A company that, with just one product, its iPhone, generates more annual revenue than entire Fortune 500 companies, over $200 billion a year. A company that didn't just make devices, it reshaped how we communicate, how we work, how we listen to music, and even how we think about product design and marketing. Can you guess which company I'm talking about? Hopefully it's not just because you saw the title of the episode. That's right. We're talking about the tech giant with the iconic logo, Apple. To understand how Apple achieved all of this, we're going to listen to two legends who helped shape that revolution from the inside. Steve Wozniak, the co-founder of Apple and the engineer behind the personal computer revolution, and Tony Fadell, widely known as the father of the iPod and one of the key architects of the iPhone. So how did it all begin? At first, Apple was just two young guys in Silicon Valley. No money, no business plan, just a shared obsession with making technology more accessible. Sounds like the classic American dream, right? But they made it real. One of them was a quiet, playful genius who loved tinkering with electronics just for fun. The other envisioned not only what computers could achieve, but also how they could transform the world. Yes, I'm talking about the two Steves, Wozniak and Jobs. Together, they didn't just build a company. They ignited a movement that reshaped not just technology, but our everyday lives. Not bad for two geeks in a garage, huh? Remember the early days of the 70s and 80s? Let me refresh your memory. Disco and funk were filling the airwaves on vinyl and cassette tapes. People were watching the first Star Wars movies in theaters, playing early video games on chunky consoles like the Atari, and dialing numbers on rotary phones. Back then, computers were huge and mostly made for scientists and big corporations. But the two Steves had a different vision, a computer designed for everyday people. Approachable, personal, and empowering. That idea that technology should feel human, intuitive, and even fun became Apple's DNA. And it all started with a hand-built circuit board. To truly grasp how bold and unlikely those early steps were, let's hear it straight from the source. Apple co-founder Steve Wozniak.
I wanted to help start a revolution, but there was no business, no money. And then Steve came into town and he saw the interest in my computer and he saw the interest in this thing and said, we should start a company to sell a part that helps make the computer easier. We could never afford to build a computer in a company. Steve and I had no bank accounts, no savings accounts, no rich relatives. We could never afford to build computers, but we could build a little PC board for $20 and sell it for $40 that would help other people build my computer. And that was the start of Apple. Other people were trying to create things they called affordable personal computers, little boxes with switches and lights. I had already built that device 5 years before. I was so advanced, I had about a 10-year period where just genius magic was pouring out of my head. And I just loved doing it for fun, not for money. Didn't think there was any money in these computers even. So the idea of a company, would there be a business? There were people starting to talk like it might actually be successful. None of the big computer companies believed in it, but we believed in it. Steve and myself believed in having a company. He was more the business interest, and I was more the technical interest, creating these genius things. And our Apple II computer was the real computer. That was designed as a computer from the ground up. The Apple I was not. And the Apple II not only was a computer, I believed in fun. And there's no way in the world you would buy a computer for your home if all it did was company things, like inventory levels and sales figures and salaries and stuff. Nobody does that in their home. You would only buy it if it played good games. And I had actually worked designing some early arcade video games. I designed Breakout, where you hit the ball against the bricks for Atari. I had designed it. I believed so much in these games, but the Apple II computer had to be not only a computer, but an arcade game playing machine. And the Apple II was the first time in history that arcade games would be color. It was the first time ever that arcade games would be software, where you could write a game in software in a day that would take engineers 6 months to a year to design out of hardware chips with signals that go up and down. That was a huge revolution for gaming too. Apple I and Apple II, the main thing they did was they got a great company started, and they also said computers can be very different than they've ever been before. All the other young people trying to start up little companies, in this no money era, were trying to build machines with complicated switches and lights, and it was the old formula. You'll plug some cards in that connect to teletypes that you can type stuff on, and the teletype costs as much as 2 cars. No, those were the old approaches. And the Apple I actually set the formula. You type on a keyboard and watch it on a TV. After the Apple I computer, no more computers would be built with a front panel anymore. No more small ones. They'd only be built with a keyboard and a video display. So that was a huge impact, big move there. Apple took other moves. Apple got a reputation for having easy to use, super powerful machines, easy to teach people. And that reputation held out because when we moved into the mouse-based computers, which was going to be Steve Jobs' comment to the world, mouse-based, you see the computer like a human being's eye sees things. You drag and drop instead of having to memorize all these awkward commands that only a computer scientist would want to memorize anyway. That was a big step for humans. Always thinking of humans. Every step that we improved over the years, Apple and other companies, was always something that was a little bit more human, more like the way humans wanted it.
Wow, that's like stepping into a time machine and witnessing how history comes alive, isn't it? But here's the thing, the story didn't end there. After those early days of building personal computers, Apple kept evolving right alongside the world around it. And as the new millennium dawned, Apple was ready to rewrite the rules once again. A new wave of revolution was brewing, one sparked by reimagining not just what technology could do, but solving problems people didn't even realize they had. To achieve this, the company zeroed in on human needs, crafted a clear story of what it aimed to solve, and put technology at the heart of that vision. The result? 2 groundbreaking revolutions, the iPhone and the iPod. To explain how it all came together, let's hear from Tony Fadell, one of the key minds behind these products.
When the iPhone showed up, what did we have? We had the internet, right? So we were carrying a laptop. We were carrying for internet browsing and for productivity. We were carrying an iPod for entertainment, for music and video. And then we were carrying a mobile phone for communications and texting, right? So when the iPhone shows up, boom, we put all of them together and we were solving a pain for people, which was carrying 3 devices with all of these different things, is really understanding what people are suffering from. Whether they understand their suffering and they can feel it every day, or sometimes it's habituated away. In other words, you have the pain, you've suffered with it for a few weeks or a few months, and you're like, that's the way it's done. It sucks, but that's the way it's done. And you just kind of go, oh, okay, and you just suffer through it every day, whether it's form filling or whatever it is. And so what you have to do is understand the pain and then communicate that pain to people and go, hey, aren't you sick of having to carry an iPod, carry a laptop, and carry a mobile phone with you with all the chargers and cables and all that stuff, and you got to lug it around because that's your mobile life now as a mobile professional, whatever. And you tell that story, right? And then you say, and now we have a way to solve it. And let me show you the new way, and here's why it's better. And it's not just better because it's a painkiller, but it's a superpower. We start with the story and the storytelling at the very beginning when we have the technological innovation to then understand what it is we are trying to build in what context and what problems we're trying to solve for, and the story at the same time. I remember Steve Jobs when it was the iPod and then iPhone or whatever it is, he would start telling us the story that he was going to get on stage to tell from literally the first week we were starting the project. And he would refine the story. He would look at different in people's eyes and tell the story and see how they were reacting. He would adjust it. He would adjust it. And literally, when you saw him come out on stage to introduce the iPod or iPhone, he had told that story thousands of times. And people are like, how can Steve Jobs go and do this? He seems so natural, because he told the same story and refined it for 6, 9, 12 months or even longer. So you have to really have that deep story inside you. The team has to understand it, because you have to understand the customer you're building for and the pain you're trying to solve, and hopefully give them a superpower at the end of the day.
And that's a wrap for today. I hope these words have been more than just anecdotes and have served as a playbook for leading, innovating, and making a lasting positive impact. Because that's what this podcast is all about. Turning these lessons into practical, scalable ideas that inspire organizations everywhere. And the lesson from this episode is this: true innovations that change the world aren't just about the latest tech or the biggest idea. They're about deeply understanding the moment we're living in, the people we serve, and having the courage to rethink what's possible. So, here's my question to you. What small change could you make today that would shift the way you solve problems, connect with customers, or imagine the future? Are you ready to tell that story? I'll leave you with that. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, stay inspired and think different. Goodbye.